All right, so welcome to the Project 4. If this is a future semester when I'm recording this might be a Project 3 or 5 or whatever, but for the fall 2020 demo video I'm recording here, this is Project 4, the Gashley Crumb Tinnies paper cutout character pages. For this, you're going to be a children's book illustrator. For this project, you'll each be given a short poem of various characters from an alphabet book by Edward Gorey. You will visually describe the poem and the unfortunate situation that the subject is found in. This is a very dark humor book. Only this time you'll be doing it in a paper cutout visual style as shown through examples here. Depth will be indicated not by highlighting and shading, but through various levels of overlapping shapes and their subsequent cast or drop shadows. Oh yeah, and your final artwork should also include the name of the character and the poem. Okay, in every page there's a poor, sad, unfortunate character who dies. It's a very dark humor book, one book that my wife had. I said this would make a great project. So think about how to approach your figure under the suggested procedure. You're always going to start with a pencil sketch. Read your poem, come up with a list of visuals, build your character in Photoshop like I'm about to show you. And this is going to be a 10 by 15 horizontal format, as if you opened a book and the left page is facing the right page. It's going to be horizontal. Okay, when you're done, you're just going to email me a high quality JPEG. Here is the list of characters. The Gashley Crumb Tinnies is an appalling alphabet which introduces a gallery of enchanting tots and produces a gasp of involuntary mirth when they attain their dreadful demises. That is the text from the book. So, like, A is for Amy, who fell down the stairs. B is for Basil, assaulted by bears. C is for Clara, who wasted away. And D is for Desmond, thrown out of a sleigh. So the whole alphabet goes through here. And I am going to be assigning you a letter. So don't pick from the list. I will choose that for you and assign it for you. And these are the original illustrations from the book. They were just simple black and white pen and ink illustrations. A is for Amy, who fell down the stairs. C is for Clara, who wasted away. But we are going to do it as a paper cut style illustration. Okay, so I'm going to do this demo here. It started off as a simple pencil sketch, so keep in mind you're doing larger shape-oriented areas, so don't look for tons of detail. That's not what we're looking for here. You want bigger, simpler shapes, because you're going to be filling those shapes with paper textures. Okay, so I'm going to do this demo here and show you how I got to this point. And let me show you some examples. So that was Acrobat. Let me close that out. And I'll come into Adobe Bridge. Okay, so I based this off of the illustration work of a Disney artist named Brittany Lee. I'm in love with her work. She does actual physical cut pieces of paper like this. And she just stacks them in levels of depth to show depth. You can see the cast shadow from the trees and the leaves. It's in a little shadow box here. Beautiful work. There's another example. You could see every little piece. She kind of wrinkles or bends the paper, so it lifts up and you get these little cast shadows in there. This can easily be replicated in Adobe Photoshop. We're not going to actually take X-Acto knives and scissors and cut and assemble things, but this is the work that she does. Here's another example taken at an angle. She does simple paper cutouts, lifts them from the surface, like I said, in these shadow box formats, and they cast these beautiful shadows in here. She twirls the paper, just amazing stuff. So here's another example of Harry Potter. Here's a Little Mermaid. and all these papers are lifted up so you can see these cast shadow effects. Here's a few more examples. On some of the really smaller areas, she doesn't cut out every single little piece of paper. She will hand draw a couple little lines for a nose, a line for an ear, the eyeballs, but the main larger shapes are hand cut. Here's a couple more examples. This is a beautiful piece with the shades of gray. And you can really get a look and feel for what she does here. You can see the textured paper that she uses. She's actually incorporating some three-dimensional objects in here. You can see her little cut lines from the X-Acto knife. Some of these edges are actually cut pretty rough, but you still get a beautiful sense of depth in her pieces here. And if I look at this little sea line right here, you can see how she lifts them from the surface, cutting out little pieces of cardboard, gluing them to the surface, and then attaching the sea lion or the seal to that piece. So it kind of lifts it up. That's how she's indicating depth, which is genius. But I want to show you how we can do that, simulating that in Photoshop. So this is a massive piece, really, really beautiful artwork here. There's another one where you can see the textured paper that she's using. Depending on how many details you want to put in there, again, really small areas like this kid's face, she's going to hand draw the eyes and the mouth in there. You don't have to draw or cut out every single piece of paper. That would be crazy. So you can see how she stacks a light blue sheet of paper and then a slightly smaller, darker blue, and then a slightly smaller, darker blue. Just beautiful hand-cut work. Genius. Okay, so I want to mimic that, but do it all in Photoshop. So let me close. Well, actually, let me come back to my desktop and show you some examples of student work that has been done for that. So let me see if I can find this here. Let's go with that folder and project handouts. Ghastly Chrome Tinnies. There we go. Okay. Student samples. So here are some examples that students have done in this class. This one was crazy, just tons of detail. I love this one by Emily Barron. P is for Prue, trampled flat in a brawl. So what is her interpretation of being trampled flat? When would you see a brawl? Christmas shopping. Everybody going crazy. This lady's like, get out of here, that is my teddy bear. Sale. She's got the shelves. This lady's smashing this lady to the ground. She's getting a little bloody nose there. Clean up on aisle 5. Prue, poor little kid, got trampled in a brawl. And she incorporated the text. So imagine this is a children's book where you would see the gutter right here. The left page versus the right page as it opens up. Okay, I used to do this as a vertical illustration like this. M is for Maud, who is swept out to sea. These are just pieces of crumpled paper that this artist assigned a shade of blue. So you got midtones, highlights, shadows, midtones, highlights, shadows, and you get that sense of depth. But what I want you to do is eventually turn in 2 copies of this illustration. One is with the text and one is without. So we can make reference to the book and then also look at it as a standalone illustration. So here's another example. B is for Basil, assaulted by bears. Cute little Basil. It doesn't have to be gory or anything like that. You know, bears ripping out their guts. I mean, come on. This is a kid's book. So, kid's book for adults, but you get the idea. So she did simple wallpaper pattern, textured paper, cardboard for the bear, and little teddy bear. That's this kid's version of assaulted by bears. But there it is without the text. Okay, this is the one I'm going to do a demo on. And here's the text. Avada Kedavra. N is for Neville, who died of ennui. Ennui is boredom. So the kid's just like studying. It's like, oh my gosh, I just got to sit here and study this book. This is boring. I'm going to die. So he did it kind of like a Harry Potter theme. But I wanted to show it again. The text and then without the text. T is for Titus, who flew into bits. So usually people show the aftermath of an explosion. Here, we know what's going to happen in 5 seconds from now. He's going to get sucked into that engine. Such dark humor. And just get blasted out the back end. David Terry did a brilliant job on this. What a story to it. But you can see the simple larger shapes to indicate the textures. We're not looking for highlights and shadows. We're looking for the representation of the characters. Okay. There it is without the text. You still can get an idea like, whoa, he's about to be chopped up. He's not going to have a good day in a couple seconds. Here's another one. L is for Leo, who swallowed some tacks. How do we know he swallowed tacks? They put it in an x-ray. I thought that was genius. Got the doctor here with textured paper, crumpled paper, wallpaper back here with just a simple textured paper with a color applied to it, recycled paper. These are all different types of paper surfaces. Here it is without the text. Stands alone just as well. And here's the last one. I didn't have one without text, but S is for Susan, who perished of fits. Fits is like seizures. So this guy based it off The Exorcist. And she's floating above her bed. She's dark and evil. I don't know what this darkness is. Maybe that's the evil spirit that's possessing her. But brilliant the way Steve Palomera did all the angles, focusing on the character. I love the way the text flows through this illustration. These are just some great concepts here. Okay, so what I wanted to do is show a demo on how to do that. So right here I've got a paper cut demo. And again, I will assign you your letter. So this is one of Brittany Lee's sketches. Okay. And what you do is you start off with a sketch. Keep your drawing simple, big open spaces, because we're filling these with paper texture. So you're not looking for tons of little detail. The branch is just the representation of a branch. And just by stacking elements, I came up with that based off of that. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. I'm not going to do the demo on this one. I'm going to do the demo on the actual project, but I wanted to show you my layers and how I configured this illustration. So it all started from the sketch. Again, keep your drawings simple. And then what I did is I used my pen tool to trace out the shape of the bird. So if I can show one of the shapes here, let's go to this layer. I used my pen tool to trace out a little shape right here. Okay, and then I turned that shape into a selection. And what I did is went out on the web, out on Google, and found different textures. So I actually found a paper texture, crumpled paper. You can see it right there. I took all the color out. So the beauty of this is you don't have to find red crumpled paper. You're just looking for textures, because you can apply colors to anything. So I found this, I think it was an old brown sheet of paper, and I turned it into grayscale. And then I laid a color on top of it, tinting the grayscale photo into this red texture. I wanted to find something with texture because the bird has a lot of feathers, so I wanted that look. Then I started to incorporate details. So I looked at the sketch, and there's a wing right there. I took that same kind of paper, pasted into the shape of the wing. That was another shape that I traced with the pen tool, applied a color tint, and then I added a drop shadow. just to get the wing to kind of pop out from the body a little bit more. Here's the eye. There's another part of the eye. There's a couple of feathers right there. And I'm going to show you how I do those. And there's a little drop shadow behind the eye. Here's a shape that I drew. I found an actual brush tip, and then I turned the brush tip into a selection, pasted some texture into it, put a little border around the effect right there. And then I started to drop in a bunch of other stuff. So threw in a watercolor texture right there. Threw in a couple of leaves. There's a bent texture right there. And I applied a color tint to it. You can apply color tints by using overlay blending mode. You can see that right here with the red feathers. Overlay will color tint a photo underneath it. And again, just running through this quick, there's the beak. There's a little beak shadow I applied to that. Here's a drop shadow to cast the bird up from the surface. And then I dropped in the whole backdrop. There's a little grassy hill, a little bit of shadow on the hill right there. And I incorporated one final border here at the top. You can see how I used brush tips to create this kind of abstract border. And then I threw the texture into that. Okay, so that's how I came up with it. But that, again, was a quick run through. So I'm going to close that out. Not going to save that. And I'm just going to do the beginning steps of another one right here. So let me go into my Ghastly Crumb Tinnies. And this was the initial sketch that one of my artist students was more than generous enough to let me use. Okay, N is for Neville, who died of ennui. So keep your sketch simple. Large, open spaces, because we got to fill those with texture. So I created a brand new blank Photoshop file that was 10 by 15 at 300 pixels per inch. And then I dropped in the sketch. Okay, so here is the demo. Okay, you can see my layers here. So I'm going to strip out all these layers right there and show you how I came up with that illustration. I'm going to show you how I came up with this look right here to begin the illustration process. Okay, so I'm just going to select and delete all those layers. And I'm going to start from scratch. So you start with your background. You can see right here the image size is 15 inches wide, 10 inches high. 200 to 300 pixels is all you need. Typically, if you're going to print, it would be 300 pixels. But since I'm just doing this on the screen, I'll keep it at 2. And what I'm going to do is just start with the basic shape of this kid's head. So let me bring this down. Get that out of the way. And I'm going to start on my paths panel. I need the shape of his head. So I'm going to start with my pen tool. And I'm just going to overlap my shapes, much like I would do in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, I'm going to start here, come around the bottom of his chin. We'll come up right here. That would be the corner of his ear. So I'll hold Option key for a corner, come up and around his ear like that. Option key for a corner, come up, and kind of draw up here where the top of his head would be, even though I'm going to cover that up with a hair piece in a minute, like putting a big wig on his head. But that's the overall shape of his head. Okay, what you do with that, after you have made your tracing, you have a working path. You go to the pop-up in the upper right of your paths panel, and you turn your tracing into a selection. Make selection. I'll keep the feathering at 0. Feather means blur, and I don't want to blur the edges of this, so I'll keep it at 0. It's like cutting it out with a pair of scissors, has a nice hard edge. And now I need my texture. So I'm going to come out to Safari here. And I don't want YouTube. Let's go to home. There we go. All right, let's drag this out. And I'm going to go to Google. I'll go to images. And I'm going to type in old paper texture. Okay, keep in mind, if I'm going to be dragging some images for texture into Photoshop, I want them to be decent sized images. So I'm going to go to Tools, Size, Large. I want to make sure I find images that will fill the spaces easily. Okay, this is okay, but I like this texture right here. But I don't want anything. Let me show you here. If it says 123 RF, it's going to have watermarks all over it. So maybe I don't want that. Let's go with this texture. Okay, that's a decent size image, 1600. So what you're going to do is you control click to bring up a context menu, or right click on a PC, and you say open image in new tab, about halfway down the list. Okay, that's going to open it right up here in this tab. So when I click, if I get a magnifying tool, I'm not looking at the right size image. So I'm going to click and get the decent big image. All I have to do, since I'm using Safari, is I click and drag it right onto the Photoshop icon and let go of my mouse, and I'll pull it right into Photoshop. If you're using Google Chrome or Firefox, you would have to drag the image to your desktop, then drag it into Photoshop. You have to add that extra step, download it to your desktop first. But if I'm using Safari, I could drag it right into Photoshop. So I'm not sure which area I really want to use on this. So I'm going to hit Command A for select all of the image. Now I go to Edit and I copy all of that image. Then when I come back to my demo, I know I want to fill this space, so I cannot just go to Edit and Paste, because that's what I'm going to get. Okay, so let's undo that. When I have the area selected, I go to Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into, and it gets trapped within that selection. Okay, you can see a little layer mask here, so the white area on my layers panel represents the visible part of the texture. The black area is where I'm not going to see the texture. So if I click on the left side, the actual texture itself, and I take my move tool, I can move this around. So I could say, well, I want to avoid that edge. Maybe there's a little bit of a highlight right in there, and I kind of like that darkness on his chin right there. So I'll move it like that. You want to find images that are big so you have room to play with them. Okay. What I want to do, though, is take a look at this, and you can see he's got the nose that just looks like it connects to the face. He's got a couple of wrinkles. Those are tiny little details. I don't want to cut out tiny little pieces of paper. So what I'm going to do is, now that I'm done with this selection, let me tear that out so you can see it. I throw away that work path for his head because I'm done with his head. And now I'm going to take my pen tool and draw another selection or another path right here. So I'm going to click and drag up, over, and down. And then I'm going to come way down here, go all the way around here like this. I'll show you why in a minute. And back to the start. Okay, I'm really concerned with just this edge right here, but I need an area to paint inside of. So I go to my paths, click the pop-up, make a selection. Now in order to apply shadows, I'm going to make a brand new layer, and I will call that Nose Shadow. And in order to make shadows, you set your layer's blending mode to multiply. Okay, I'm going to hit D for default colors. Take my eyedropper, and since I'm doing a shadow, I want to base it off these skin tones. So I'll pick a darker color down here. Maybe click that and go a little darker right in there. All right, with my paintbrush, I'm going to hold Control key and Option key, make my brush a little bigger, like that. And then I want to lower the opacity. I want to slowly build up my shadows. So I'll drag this down to about 25%. Okay, what I can do is start inside here and just skim the edge right there. Okay, we'll do it again and again and again. Command D, and now I've got a little shadow cast for that nose. If that wasn't enough, now I've gotten rid of my selection, I can also hold Command key and click on the picture of the work path and just load it up one more time. And then I'll just do a couple more passes here. A couple more right there. Make his nose a little darker, a little bigger there. Command D, and there's his nose. Okay, let's throw away that work path. Turn these two layers off so I can see what I'm doing here, and I'm going to take my pen tool. We'll do another shape right here. So let's come up and over that ear, and again I'm going to make a big huge selection here. Command click on the work path, but I want to paint the shadow down here. I don't want to paint inside this area, so I can go to Select menu and turn my selection inside out, inverse. So now I'm going to be able to paint this area in here. You can see it right there. It goes all the way around in here. So now, when I turn this on, I'll do another layer called Ear Shadow 1. And same skin tone color, maybe a little darker because I had to do more than a few passes to get that. And now I'm just going to skim this edge right there. Just hit a little shadow right there. Command D, there we go. Throw away that work path. Now let's do another one. Take my pen tool right here, and I'll just go right up along that edge right there. All the way around back to the start. I need room to paint right in here. Command click the work path. Now let's do another layer. We'll call that Ear Shadow 2. And, oops, I forgot. If I'm doing shadows, set them to multiply. If I'm doing a shadow, set it to multiply. So now I'll just skim this edge right here. Just a little bit like that. And notice I'm getting some shadow up in here. I just wanted it right here. Okay, I don't want this, but that's fine. If I overpaint, I can create a layer mask. D for default colors, X to switch to black, and now with my opacity at 100%, I can scrape away that overpaint right there. Just kind of blend those two out right there. All right, there we go. Got a nice little shadow inside of his ear, got his nose kind of popping up from his head, and his other ear kind of tucks behind, so we'll deal with that in a minute. I'm going to throw away the work path. And if you have a simple, smaller section, like this tiny ear, you don't have to use the pen tool for everything. In fact, I can just click and drag with my lasso tool. I think I can get a pretty smooth edge right here. There we go. And I'm going to make a brand new layer, starting down here so it looks like his ear tucks behind his head. I'll start underneath his head, create a brand new layer. I already have my texture still available, so I'll just do it again. Edit, copy. Now I come over here, edit, paste special, paste into. Great. I'm going to command click right here on the thumbnail of the layer mask. Hold command key and click. That activates the selection again because I'm going to make another brand new layer called ear shadows. I still have my same color. My shadow layers are set to multiply. And we'll drop my opacity down again. Maybe I'll go about 30% this time. And just cast a little shadow coming out from behind his head right there. Okay, let's hit Command D. I'm going to turn off all my layers. And you're going to get a stack of layers going here. So if you wanted to see your background and turn off all your other layers, you can option click the eyeball. All the other layers will turn off. So now, again, I don't need my pen tool for everything. I'll just do my own little shadow shape right here. Okay, we'll kind of bring that around and go around like that. And let's turn on all my layers. Option click. I'm still on the ear shadows, so let's take that same brush and we'll just skim the outer edge right there. Just a little bit right in there. Command D. Cool. Now I need a separate object, so I'm going to make another brand new layer called ear shadow 2. Option click the eyeball so I can see what I'm doing here, and now I'm going to start with this shadow line coming right up there. Make a big selection to paint inside of. I can zip through my eyeballs if I want to do it that way. Here's another layer for shadows, so I will also set that to multiply. And I'll just skim that edge right there. Put a little shadow in there. Command D. Okay, that looks bad as well. So again, if you overpaint, create a layer mask. D for default, X for black. When you're on a layer mask, you're going to set your opacity to 100%, and that allows you to scrape away that extra paint right there. So I got a nice little kid's head going on right here. Cool. All right, I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm going to hold my option key on this eyeball. Turn that off. This hair is a bigger shape, so I will use my pen tool. And let's just go right here, up, option for a corner and come down, option for a corner and come across, option for a corner and go up. I'm going to use the option key here, option key there, option key there. Yeah, everywhere I hit a corner, option key, then drag, option key, then drag, option key, then drag. Option key. Let's go up like that. We'll go around here. Option key, drag, option key, drag, option key, drag, option key for corners. A lot of little corners on his pointy little hairs here. There we go. Now I'll come up and give him a little bump in his head right there. Come back. Option key to close at a corner. Now again, I've made a tracing, so I go to my work path. I can either click the pop-up and make it a selection, or since I already know my selections work, I can hold Command key and click. There's another active selection. And here's what I wanted to show you. Okay, if I turn everything on to see what I'm doing here, and I am on the top layer, because I want his hair to sit on top of that. I'm going to take my old texture, throw it away. We'll come back down to Safari here. We'll close that up. And now I'm going to type in, let's say, crumpled paper texture. I want something with a lot more detail to it. All right, this looks good right here. I love the amount of detail there. I don't want him to have brown hair. I don't care about that. I just like the texture. So I'm going to command or control click, open the image in a new tab right above the image. There's my texture. I've got a magnifying tool, so I'll click. That wasn't much of a difference, but I always want to check. I'm going to drag that down onto Photoshop and let go. Now it pops into Photoshop. Obviously, I don't want this white, so I'm going to take my crop tool and just crop out the bottom right there. All right, Command A for select all. Edit and copy. Now when I come over here, let's get off the crop tool, I have a selection made. But if I am on a layer that is turned off, edit, paste special, and paste into will not work. Okay, so in order to use this, you have to be on a layer where the eyeball is turned on. So I'm going to turn these on. I'm on a layer where the eyeball is turned on. Now I can go to edit, paste special, paste into. Great. I like that just how it is. I don't like the color of his hair. So what I'm going to do is turn this into a black and white image. Okay, image menu, adjustments, black and white. If I want a little bit more darkness, I can take the reds and make them darker right there. Maybe a little bit of the yellows as well. The heavier the gray, the more color you're going to see in the next step. If it was really bright like that, you wouldn't see much color. But if it's darker gray, that's going to help me to see color. So when I click OK, here's how I add color. I go to the layer mask, command click to reload a selection around the hair, and I add a brand new blank layer. We'll call this red hair color. Okay, I'm going to mix a shade of color. So let's pick like a reddish orange here. Kind of come up into there. There we go. If I have a selection made, Option key and the big delete key will fill that area with the current foreground color. But you can see that just drops in flat paint. It totally covered up my texture. So again, if you want to tint color into a layer, you set your layer's blending mode to overlay. And there we go. I wanted him to be a little more reddish. So I'm going to click here, just pick a slightly more reddish tone up in here. And just hit Option and delete again. There we go. I like that. Command D to deselect. But you know what? I don't like how flat that is. I want to start indicating depth, like the depth of the shadow of the nose, but with Photoshop drop shadows. So right here, this was the paper itself. Okay. I can go to the far right, double click, and in my layer styles, I click on the words drop shadow. That's a horrible drop shadow. So what I'm going to do is set the distance way, way, way back. Maybe not so much of the size, so I can really start to see a little more definition. Now I can pull the distance out, maybe change the angle a little bit. Let's go right about kind of like that, how that's casting a shadow off of there. I don't want the drop shadow to be black, so I'll click there and let's come in with more of that brownish tone that I painted for the nose, so I can kind of get them to match a little closer. And I like that. There we go, added a little more depth to the piece. Now I'm going to do one more area, which is his collar right here. So I don't need this path. I can throw it away. And the collar is pretty simple, so I'm just going to use my lasso for that. We'll just come down like this, up, down, and overlap my shapes, much like I do in Illustrator. I don't need this crumpled paper. In fact, you know what? I'm going to keep that for a second. I'm just going to select a section for his collar. And let's go with a rectangle. Maybe I just like this little section right here. Okay, that's going to be good enough for me. Edit, copy, and now I'll throw away that crumpled paper. I don't need that anymore. Now I've got another selection made. I'm on a layer where the eyeball is turned on. Let me get rid of these paths over here. Okay, I'm on a layer where the eyeball is turned on, so edit, paste special, paste into, and that looks kind of weird. So let's see if that actually worked. Okay, yes, it did work. Just the photo's a little bit too small. Command T, I can drag the corners out just so I know it fills up that space, and I'll hit return. And I want that collar obviously to tuck underneath his chin. So I'm just going to pull that layer way, way, way down here. Tuck it out from coming out from behind right there. And I don't want the collar to look so wrinkled. So I can apply a filter to my photos. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'll just kind of soften that up a little bit right there so I don't see it as much. I don't want his collar to look dingy either, so I'll go to Image menu, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and recolor that texture. So maybe I'll change the hue, give him like a light bluish shirt here. Tone down the saturation, so just get a hint of blue there. There we go. Maybe lighten that up a little bit. All right, got a nice clean collar right there. Okay, but again, he has light skin next to a light collar. I want to cast a little shadow from his face. But if I go down to the layer where his face is, and what I would also suggest is start naming your layers, because I almost thought this was his face, but that was his ear. So I want to come up here. If you're not sure, just turn the eyeball off. All right, I'm going to double click and we'll call that face. But if I double click to the right and I click drop shadow, that drop shadow is going way off the side of his face. And I don't really like that. So I'm going to click cancel. Okay. If you want your own shadows, like I said before, I'm going to call this layer color. You create a brand new layer. We'll call that collar shadow. Shadow layers are set to multiply. I take my eyedropper, sample one of the colors here, maybe mix up a slightly darker shade. Okay, and if I don't want my paint to go all over the place, I'm going to command click on this layer mask thumbnail. That puts a selection right back around the collar. And now I'm going to paint in my own shadow. I always drop when I paint. I drop the opacity maybe to about 30%, just so I can add a little hint of a shadow just along that edge. Maybe a little more here, a little less along the edges right there. There we go. Command D, and that just kind of gets his head to pop forward. Okay. I'm going to option click there. I could do something a little more creative with these eyeballs like this. Let's do this. I'll take my lasso tool. I'm going to click and drag right there. Up and around. Option click the eyeball. And I'm just going to pull a piece of his face. So let's just go to this layer. Command J. And what that did is just pull the copy of his eye. Pulled a copy of his skin tone. So if I go to my move tool, you could see it right there. I just pulled a section of that photo. Okay. Double click to the right. Let's cast a little drop shadow. Maybe this one is not very far. Like that, just to get a little bit of definition there. Cool. All right, option click. Let's do the other eye or eyelid. So let's go right there, up and around, Option click the eyeball to bring my layers back. There's his head again. Command J just to copy a little section of that. Now, I put the effect, the drop shadow on this layer, but I want the same effect on this eye. So I'm going to go right up here on the word effects, hold my option key for a copy, and drag the copy right there. So now the eyes match. Very cool. All right, let me do one more for his eyeball. So we'll just go right around here like that. And I'm going to hold Shift key. We'll do the other eye right here. Shift means I can add another selection like that. Okay, we'll just fill those white. So right down here on the face layer, I make a brand new layer called White Eyes. D for default colors. And now to fill these areas with the background color, I can hit Command and delete. Okay, but I don't like his eyes looking so flat. Remember, this is about texture. So I'm going to come to, actually, let's do this. Edit, undo. I'm going to do the same thing I did with his eyeballs. We'll just take a piece of his face, Command J, and now I go to Image Menu, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and we'll just drag the lightness of that texture way over. Just enough like that. Okay, I can barely see the texture, but at least I know in my mind I'm not just using flat white paint. Good enough for me. Okay, let's take the effects, option key to copy the effect, and let's see if we can get that drop shadow to show up. Oop, that was, okay, wrong layer. Haha, because I made a copy. Option key and drag it to there. There we go. There's his eyes. All right, I don't want these eyes to be as dark as his eyelids, so I'm going to double click the word effects, click on the word drop shadow, and maybe lower the opacity just so I get just a hint of definition around those eyes. Cool. All right, let's take the lasso. We'll finish off these eyes. So we'll do another little oval right there. And let's see if I have that right. Yeah, that's pretty close. Shift key, we'll do another little oval right there. Option click the eyeball. And just for argument's sake, I'm going to come down to the head, hit Command J again, make that texture again. We'll just pull it up here. There we go. Image menu, adjustments, hue and saturation, and we'll drag the lightness down. Maybe change the hue to give him somewhat bluish eyes. We'll saturate those and darken those a little bit. Awesome. All right. Now you can start to see Neville starting to come together here. Okay, keep in mind, really tiny little areas. You could just drag with your lasso tool, do a little painting in there if you wanted to, or copy the face and do some hue and saturation. If he's got a little blush on his cheeks right here, I could take this layer of his head, his face, make a brand new layer called Blush Cheeks. I'll set that to, let's try Overlay for a little tint of color. And we'll take some pink, take my brush and make it really, really, really low opacity. And just add a little blush to his cheeks here. There we go. Let's bring that opacity back up. There we go. A little bit more blush. If I set that to multiply, it might start to look like bruises. But here's what's cool. Next to my layer blending modes is my opacity. I could drag that way down. There we go. That blush looks a lot better. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to approach this project. Okay, you're going to start getting stacks of layers. If you really like what you've done here and you're just thinking, I'm not going to change that, instead of keeping a million layers here, you can take these layers, but again, only do this when you know you are done with that section. I can click there, shift click down to here, click my pop-up, and merge all those layers together. So now he has one big head. So I can call that Neville's head. Okay, all these layers, I don't know what that is, but here to here, click, shift click, I can merge all those. So now I'm back down to only 2 layers. We'll call this collar. Okay, there's Neville's collar. There's Neville's head, made up of a bunch of pieces, but now I've combined them. I just better make sure I really like that, because once I combine them, I'm done. But we can move on from that point. So you get the idea on how you're going to fill your areas with your paper textures and be creative about your textures. I really look forward to seeing what you can come up with, because you are the artist, you are the illustrator, and you are the creative one with a million possibilities. So have at it. I look forward to seeing what you do.